All right, now we're joined by Teresa Mosqueda, who's running for City Council Position 8. So go ahead with a 2-minute introduction.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Teresa Mosqueda. I'm running citywide for Position 8. Excited to be here with you today. This is my district. I'm the 36th. I'm honored to be here. I have grown up in this area. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest at the south end of the Puget Sound, and I've been in Seattle for about 20 years. And I'm really proud to say in Seattle we have progressive roots that the entire nation is looking at us. They look at us to lead in terms of lifting low-wage workers up. They look at us to lead in terms of environmental standards, and they're looking at us right now to lead in terms of how we fight back on the Trump agenda. And I'm really proud. I'm proud of Seattle. I know there's a lot of people who are coming here because they've been pushed out of their own homes because there's low-wage jobs there, and they're looking for more economic prosperity, so they're coming to Seattle. They've been pushed out of their homes in many cases because of environmental impacts. It's too hot, or climate change is just too rough in the areas that they're living in, and they're coming here. And I want to make sure that those who are coming here have a place to live in our city, good economic job opportunities, and that we welcome everybody in our city. I look around right now, and there's about 1,000 people a week that are coming to our city. We don't have enough housing for the folks who live here right now. We don't have enough housing for the folks who are coming soon. I want to create a Seattle that both protects the rights of every individual who lives here under this new Trump administration, but also creates a welcoming city for everybody who's coming. That makes sure that we have affordable housing for everybody who's here. That makes sure that we have a housing option for everybody who's actually homeless right now in our streets. And because I come to this through a health equity lens and through a worker justice lens, I also want to make sure that Seattle's a place where everyone has the opportunity to live and have a good living wage job. That this is an economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthy few. And I look around Seattle, I know we can do a better job at economic opportunities, educational opportunities, and make sure that our lowest wage workers have what they need, but also middle income workers. Far too many people are being priced out of their city right now because they can't afford childcare, can't afford their own housing. We can do a better job in a place like Seattle.
Great, thank you. Now we have our 4 prepared questions that we're asking all candidates for City Council. Feel free to turn it over if you'd like to read along as we read them aloud. So 2-minute answers, and John, we'll start with number 1.
Sure. What is your strategy for implementing, leveraging, and perhaps improving the incentive zoning program to create diverse neighborhoods and assure affordable housing?
Yeah. So I want to see us move forward for real solutions that provide housing for the real people I'm talking to every day. Every single day that I go out and talk to folks at the doors, whether it's seniors who are having a hard time affording their property taxes, whether it's renters like me, or students, or whether it's middle-income families who are trying to start their own families and live in the city that they work, folks are having a hard time affording to live in Seattle. I want to see us move forward with creating the 20,000 affordable housing units that we've been promised in the next decade, but also recognize that as we build, it has to include community voice. Development has to include women and minority-owned businesses at the table and those who are at risk of displacement and gentrification. We have to recognize the historic redlining that's happened in our city in the past and make sure that those who are most at risk for displacement are brought to the table as we talk about what development looks like. So as we create housing, as we create commerce, as we create more upzoning, it needs to include that community voice at the table because we all recognize that alone, that's not enough. I want to make sure that if housing is not included in the new development, that the city gets that money and gets that money in the coffers. I will not be the city council person that lets $3.4 million sit on the table for 4 years. That's money that we could be using. I want to hold developers accountable to get those dollars in the door and then do what's right with those public dollars. Invest in community land trust. Invest in limited equity co-ops. Invest in additional assistance for our seniors and our lowest income who've done everything they can to buy a home, to be able to live in the city, and are being priced out right now. There's more that we could be doing with a public dollar in hand to create more housing options. We got to develop affordable options. We have to do it with the community voice at the table and use the public dollar in a smart way and invest in publicly owned homes, community co-ops, and land trusts to create true opportunity for people to get their foot in the door.
Sherry, number 2.
Oh, thank you. In your view, what is the city's role in ensuring equal educational and achievement opportunity for schools?
I love this question because it recognizes that at City Council, we do have a role in making sure that kids show up ready to learn in school. A lot of times people say, well, that's the school board's role. The City Council absolutely has the opportunity to make sure that kiddos are arriving at school ready. ready to learn. I have worked at the Children's Alliance and Department of Health, Community Health Network of Washington, and we have worked on programs to make sure that when kids show up to school, they're ready to learn. That means early learning programs, that means after school programs, that means summer school programs. I want to see the city step up and do more. I'm also, I still play soccer on Wednesday nights for co-ed around our city, and I know that that's a way to create a vibrant community around school-based centers that make sure that families are involved in getting kids outside, physically active, and involved in their community. I also want to make sure that we are working with the school districts so that if there's kids in schools that have disciplinary issues, that we're not expelling them, that we have programs that keep kids in school, because often schools are the only place where kids are getting a lunch. It's the only place where kiddos are getting breakfast in many cases. And we know that once kids are kicked out of school, they're more likely to end up in a more of a downward spiral, get in trouble more often. So I want to work with the school board and those who work within our schools to keep kids in school. The Seattle Education Association has endorsed me, and they've endorsed me because I think that they know I take a holistic approach to saying what it takes to create healthy kids. Before and after school programs, keeping kids in school, making sure that when we send our kids to school, that they actually have healthy environments to get there, walkable, livable neighborhoods, safe routes to school. We are not creating an environment where kids show up ready to learn if they're waiting for the school bus on a street that doesn't have a sidewalk, on a street that doesn't have a street lamp, on a street that has a pothole, and they're getting rained on and splashed by traffic whizzing by. Those zoning issues and planning issues are things that we have control over. We can change that so kids show up ready to learn.
Michael, number 3.
What are your specific recommendations for completion and follow-up steps of the Seattle Police Department consent decree and ongoing steps to improve department relations with Seattle's residents?
I think the first issue that we have to recognize is that the police cannot police themselves. First and foremost, we have to follow through on the recommendations that the former administration had made through the Department of Justice, and recognize that when the federal administration, including the Department of Justice, turns it back or changes its priorities, that we in the city have to keep our commitment to reforming our police department. The police cannot police themselves, and it's important that we not only have civilian oversight and community oversight to create better trust, but better trust also equals safer communities. That's how you create public trust. So I want to see us move forward with the DOJ recommendations. I want to see civilian oversight. I support the community-led recommendation that we broaden the number of folks who are sitting on that civilian oversight panel to 21. That's what they're suggesting. And a third of those appointed by community, a third appointed by the city council. Make sure that community voice is actually at the table and that there's true independent oversight. Lastly, one of the most important things that I think we can do as a city is say we have to demilitarize our police force. It is not creating trust with anybody in the community when our police show up at events or rallies or protests wearing militarized uniforms, or if their vehicles are militarized, or if the new facilities that are being built don't interact with our community and create a sense of place and a sense of trust. So in addition to the recommendations, I'd like to see us move forward with demilitarizing the police force. But this is all in an effort to actually create trust, which is the most important thing for victims of crime, for victims of domestic violence, for those who want to have better safety and better interaction with their community. That's what we need, is civilian oversight and community-led policing.
Nicole, number 4.
What is your strategy for dealing with homelessness in Seattle?
So last Thursday, I went out with some of the folks, the nurses and case managers who work at places like Neighbor Care. I talked to folks who work at DESC. I've talked to folks who work directly in our community, both in shelters, in permanent assisted housing, and housing that helps with women and families that are trying to get off the street. And the number one thing that I'm hearing directly from folks who are both unsheltered themselves and from folks who work with folks who are homeless is that we need more low barrier facilities. We need to get folks into housing first. That's navigation centers, that's shelters that allow people to come as they are, and make sure that people get the housing that they need first. And then we have to help them with the healthcare needs that they're facing. So first it's getting them inside, somewhere warm, a bed, a roof over their head, a safe place to live. And then we have to make sure that they have the case managers, the nurses, mental health providers that they actually need to make sure that they get the services they need. The firefighters who can do those three issues are what I want to see in terms of infrastructure. We do not have a detox facility in our city limits. We need more places for folks to go to get healthy, and that includes not only detox facility, but in inpatient and outpatient treatment. That's what I'm hearing from our medical providers who have endorsement as well. Last thing that we need is basically to create more options. We do not have enough services in this city. We need to have more low barrier facilities, more tiny house projects, think innovatively, but safely and respectfully work with those who want to be inside, and the vast majority of folks do want to be inside.
Great. So now we'll open up to follow-up questions. These are 1-minute answers, and we'll start with Ben.
So right now, our minimum requirement for affordable units in new buildings is 2%, and that 2% isn't actually strictly enforced. You probably know. What will you raise that percentage to, and how aggressively will you enforce that?
So 2% is the minimum, right? And as we go across the city, we're talking neighborhood by neighborhood to see how high we can push that. Can we push it to 10%? Can we push it to 12%? Having conversations with community about what they want to see. And what I've looked at in terms of alternative models, if there was going to be a number across the board, is to see what's working in other areas. I look at a place like San Francisco where 25% has been thrown out. Frankly, San Francisco's Board of Supervisors came back to the table last month. They said 25% across the board doesn't work, and what they're actually doing is looking community by community, kind of urban village by urban village to see what actually works, and folks are coming up here to see what Seattle's model is. I think that we need to move forward with developing affordable housing now, push that limit as high as we can in every community, have that amount be dictated by the community at the table, and recognize that it hasn't been communities of color or those most at risk for displacement who've been most hurt from. We want to hear from them, push forward and have that amount as high as possible, but what we've seen from other cities is that there's not a universal across the board number.
Great. Additional questions? Yeah, Jason.
Hi, could you describe your work with the Washington Exchange Board?
Oh, thank you. Yes, for asking. So I sat on the Health Insurance Exchange Board for 4 years, first appointed by Gregoire and then appointed by Inslee. I served 2 terms. It's a board of 9 people, and half of them appointed by Democrats and half appointed by Republicans. So you think about people who are coming with their own independent lens on each one of those. My hat that I wore was the patient advocate representative. And I was often the loudest and the most vocal, standing up for the lowest wage workers, families who were having a hard time getting through the system, and our smallest businesses. When we say that we are going to promise folks health care, we have to make sure that we follow through. Every single piece of legislation that I've been involved in, it's not just a matter of pushing forward a piece of legislation because the wording sounds good, but I've been there after the ink is dry to actually make sure it works. I sat on that insurance exchange board and for 4 years stood up to make sure that people not only had the promise of healthcare, but that we delivered on it. My head was patted flat, my wrist was slapped red, but I'll keep speaking up for those who are most vulnerable.
Great. Additional questions? Yeah, John.
Can you speak to some of the progressive tax revenue initiatives that are currently going through council? Do you have any additional ideas on progressive budget?
Yeah. So when it comes to the conversation around income tax and the work that the city council has led, I say it's about time. This is one of the most prosperous cities and one of the most prosperous states, and we do not have an income tax. I congratulate the effort to move forward in challenging our status quo in terms of not having an income tax. I know that that's going to get held up for a little bit in court potentially, but we have to be willing to think outside of the box, especially now when federal funding is being cut, when we have gridlock in our own state capital, when we don't have a budget right now. We need to push forward to have the dollars that we need to invest in our community. I went last week down to our state capital to push for capital gains as well, because we have wealthy individuals who are pushing a button, they're trading stocks and bonds, and that is wealth that we could be getting into our state coffers or into our local coffers as well. We need to think outside of the box, even if it's something that hasn't been considered before. These are trying times, and we have to push the envelope.
Great. Clayton?
You mentioned housing in several respects. I'm curious whether we have the Seattle Housing Authority as a kind of out of Mongolia city bureaucracy, and whether you see any connection between the problems in housing that we have and bringing the SHA into focus, into the goal of our current problems. That
Yeah.
even in Section 8, but they're very much isolated entity, it seems.
Yeah.
So,
I think we absolutely have to bring everybody to the table to get us caught up to speed. We are behind the times in terms of creating affordable housing in this city. We do not have the infrastructure that we need to house those who are here, nor those who are coming in. And I am really interested in pushing the envelope to make sure that more diverse voices are heard, including mine. I'm a renter. I would be the only renter elected to Seattle City Council. And in a city that has over 50% of its population as renters, I think that we need to have a voice of those who are there, who experienced, like me, last Wednesday, my rent increasing by $250, who, like me, have tried in the last 2 years to buy a home and been outbid by 20 and 25% by some folks who are coming in above the asking price. And I think we also need more folks to hear that those who have Section 8 vouchers, they're not able to get into the housing that they need on transit corridors and affordable housing as well to transition out of shelters. That was the very experience I heard last Thursday in Belltown when I was with some homeless folks.
Thank you.
Nicole, Bevan, and then if we have time.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your stance on municipal broadband.
Yeah. So I've had the chance to work and talk with some of the folks who are working on municipal broadband, and my immediate gut reaction was the access to high-speed internet is as fundamental as access to affordable housing or affordable utilities. Right now in today's day and age, we know that you need access to high-speed internet to get a job, to search for health insurance, to search for the assistance that you need to basically survive in today's day and age. To get a job, you need to be able to have access to internet. When I sat on the Insurance Exchange Board, one of the first things that they did was they said, hey, that this was at the state level, we're gonna cut the community outreach workers because now everybody can go online. And I'm like, no, they cannot. Not everybody has access to internet, and not everybody has a computer in their home. So fighting to make sure that folks throughout our city have access to high-speed internet is something I absolutely support. It's a fundamental need in today's day and age. It creates good wage jobs, and it's something that makes Seattle step up to the 21st century.
Great, Bevan?
So kind of a two-pronged question.
Okay.
Starting with, what are your thoughts on foreign direct investment in terms of our building and so on in the city and growth? And in relation to that, what is your plan in terms of environmentally sustainable infrastructure?
Okay.
As it grows?
Okay. So in terms of Wall Street investors coming in and buying up whether it's empty parking lots and just leaving them vacant and not creating housing options, or buying up housing and letting them sit there empty, those are not solutions to the housing crisis that we have in front of us right now. I am very interested in looking at Toronto's model that they just passed a few weeks ago and Vancouver's model that they've had on the books for a while, which says that we want those who are in our city to be contributing to making sure that there's affordable housing. I know we have different laws and regulations in terms of what's possible, but like I said before, we have to be willing to push the envelope, think outside of the box, and we need housing solutions now. Folks who are sitting on empty parking lots or empty homes, just waiting for the equity to increase and not creating housing options, that doesn't help contribute to the economy and to the community that we want to see here in Seattle. So I'd be very interested in looking at those models. In terms of green jobs, green energy economy, I have pushed for just transition, and hopefully I'll be able to answer that question in the next part. But just transition, just jobs, and we got to make sure that we move us into the 21st century as well and create clean energy job economy in our city.
Okay, Ben, final question.
Thanks. So would you please tell us what percentage of your campaign financing has come from the democracy vouchers?
Yeah.
And how has your campaign made collecting vouchers a priority?
Yes, great question. So I am proudly participating in the Democracy Voucher Program this year. Over 63% of the voters said that they wanted to see the Democracy Voucher Program in our city, and I'm helping to make sure that we show that it's successful. This gets big donors, big dollars out of our politics, and I'm 100% committed to this program. I have raised, as of this morning, about $120,000 in this raise. I would say over half of that has come from the democracy vouchers. We have seen small donors come forward in the first month. I think we had 47 was the average contribution. And you know what that says to me? People want to use their democracy dollars, they want to give $10, $20 if they can, but they also recognize that this is about putting the people's voice first. The reason that I'm participating in the democracy voucher program is because it gives us a chance to talk to folks who said, why did I vote before? My vote didn't count. And when I go door to door, they're like, thank you for coming by. Nobody's ever come before. Yeah, sure, I'd love to participate. And this is a way that we organize our community to get more civically engaged.
Perfect. So we are out of time. If you want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement.
Sure. So, thank you once again for having me. This is my home district, and I would be so honored to be able to have your endorsement. As you look at the list of folks who've endorsed me, it's Democratic Party leaders, it's community leaders, it's organizations that I've worked with in communities of color, low-wage workers, senior advocates, children's advocates, folks who have seen me in action, pull together coalitions, not just around good ideas, but creating good legislation that reflects the community voice, reflects the voice of those affected, and actually pass good policy. And I'll be there to make sure that it actually works for those we promised it to. That's, I think, what Seattle needs right now. I hope for your support.
Great. Thank you very much.